Okay. Peace, salam. We are working today. What? Last night there was some good things about circles and sort of the end of the world. There's a bit I haven't filled in about how there's a really intuitive 4D explanation for why there's right angles at the edge of the circle, but I don't think that's going anywhere. The other day somebody mentioned on YouTube, actually there's a lot of comments like this on YouTube, many people have been moved in the same way to say, hey, this algorithm which chooses music for people who like music is really, really effective. I was doing research and I found this out. So I wrote a comment saying, I think this person said like it's kind of spooky how well it predicts music. I wrote a comment back saying, I think this is the despookification, and I wrote this quite long thing, which I don't think I have anymore, but I touched on some stuff that I thought, yeah, that's worth preserving. Pretty much the reason that the YouTube algorithm is so great at choosing music that you like is because the only information it has about you is what you watch and what you don't watch. And that's so sincere of you, that is so honest, that just what you watch, that's a really, really good marker. And for how long you watch it, that's an incredible marker of whether or not you really like it or not. And out of all the signals there are in the world, it's one of the truer signals that we have. For instance, it represents that you like that song a lot more if you watch that song on YouTube than it does that you watch a TV show, even though the TV show is longer. It's kind of what makes it less valid as evidence that you like the TV show. So there's all this stuff about that particular algorithm, and then I was thinking, well, what situations can this be malicious? And you could get into a certain cycle where everything that you're recommended only recommends within itself. And now there's a cool thing about just the most simple algorithm you can have, that if someone listens to it a lot and someone else listens to something else a lot, then they're both going to like it. Just on that premise, it means that really obscure stuff can hide out where, like, basically the function of obscurity here is that if your fans all like completely different things and you're like a random element in all of your fans' stuff, then the algorithm doesn't have a way to recognize that and what kind of thing it is and then pass it on to others. But as time goes on, all it takes is for one other thing to be sort of in common amongst your fans, maybe something new or maybe something that people discover. And then once that happens, they don't join together, and you can have like this old rare jewel just flood around the world. It's amazing for how much it affects, like, I don't know, the reality that it throws around for just being this little algorithm. That Alice Coltrane was the musician for the video that I was commenting on. And there's a real sense that, like, the things that maybe she has endured or lived through or put on top of whatever was easy, and her efforts and strengths and something that was so individual about her, now like a million people can hear it where a million people wouldn't have heard it before. And that's just, that's incredible. That's a really good algorithm. It makes real her music in a way that it wasn't. Okay, but you can also get this kind of thing where instead of just having an artist where all of your fans don't really have anything in common, you can also have the kind of artist where all of your fans do have a lot in common. In that case, being the algorithm, I always want to hand you stuff from that idea set, stuff that all has in common with itself, because that's what I know you like. And as that happens, your signals to me get stronger and stronger that all you like is this one genre. Now, something pernicious obviously can happen. I don't think anyone is shocked that something pernicious can happen. What if you're the people who are making the content that you know a lot of your fans have the same thing in common? Market forces drives you to want to hit that one note harder and harder and more again. I find in a lot of cases you're going to run out of things to say about that one rallying point, and soon, in the worst possible case, turn to Joes and anti-Joes. This is the bit I really want to get to. I've never understood how politicians manage to do such a bad job. Like, I've never suspected any kind of evil, but also I see manifest evil as the result of politicians doing such a poor job. And you go, well, maybe there's an ethical imperative that they would just step down if they, see all the people on the streets and they see catastrophe, maybe they step down. But they don't step down, and I also can't find myself to think of them as evil for not stepping down, even though there is a lot of moral potential. What's with that? How do politicians manage to mess stuff up so much? Doesn't matter which side they're on, doesn't matter what they say, doesn't matter the color of their skin or the principles of their premises. I'm of the firm opinion that democracy has never ever been good for the poor. How do the politicians manage to create this? Aren't they supposed to be smart? Okay, so Joes and anti-Joes. A politician starts out by being detached. Then, when you're in that kind of environment, and I'm talking about a 2020 politician, every time you leave your house, the most like vile, shouting, scathing about everything and anything, doesn't matter what side. Your interface to the public is the press. And you've got to be the politician worrying about the press over your shoulder all the time, but the press can't do anything. It's the public. And the public, the threat that the press elicits on behalf of the public, like the real threat that the public can present is that just beheadings everywhere, set fire to government buildings. As soon as the poor unite, the rich are surrounded, and that's a threat in as much as things are messed up. So I'm on the politician's side here. I'm thinking, hey, if that's your job and that's what you see of the world, then I don't blame the politician that you would have to work with a simplified idea of what the public is and therefore what you are. There's another big dynamic that goes on here, particularly with respect to fascist systems, where if you have a government that's weak, like we've just seen where the conservative government that was in charge, who they couldn't find any consensus within themselves on the Brexit issue, and so we watched for 2 unelected prime ministers in a row and 3-4 years, however you want to count it, of our main house of law just squabbling with itself, all within one party. And anyone who has both sense and who had respect for this process and these people cannot now. We've seen it. It was awful. Now there's been a distinct change. Now because there needed to be, there's a leader. And my writing went into the dynamics of choosing a new leader out of a scattered party, and whether the new leader is just everyone agrees on them as like a de facto thing, like, okay, let's get on with it, or there's one person who maybe is particularly charismatic or knows a lot of secrets or something, who runs around going, no, look, whatever I vote for, you got to vote on the same thing. Because when you don't have any of those, even without any animosity, it can be, how's everyone going to vote on the same thing if no one's all agreeing to vote on the same thing? Their foremost capacity to construct laws is to be able to all vote on the same thing. They don't have any representation, any of them, within the court unless they're all voting on the same thing. But it can happen that even though it's all in everyone's interest to vote on a same thing, instead, just no one's quite sure who to follow. Um, we saw Theresa May, bless her. She was prime minister. She seemed like, you know, the only prime minister in a while that I can remember who hasn't done anything to personally offend me. And it was her job to be just heckled by the press every day. That was her thing, and she couldn't speak in that court other than people would heckle her. And I find that close to treason. That, like, she's trying to run the country, and she was doing desperately, and I'm sure they all do, but she just had no fault about her, and it was very clear that because she was a woman, it very much seemed that she couldn't open her mouth without everyone shouting over her. Okay, anyway, power vacuum. Another woman could have kicked butts, maybe. No, they just weren't listening. They were refusing to listen. Like, if I did that, I would get sacked if I had a job. If people who are running the country are doing that, they should be beheaded. More, more civil. Uh, I speak only for myself, and I'm not sure if I mean it, but hey, I'm tired of violence. So, you got this scattered party. The biggest threat within your ranks of the people that you actually deal with is going to be like conscientious defectors. You hate the person who can't speak the party line whilst everything is scattered. You've got no power whatsoever. Whoever is maybe going to be the hippie of the group, if you're the conservatives, or whoever's going to be the one who's just not going to follow the party line, that's a threat to you. In your reality, that's a real threat to you. And then you step outside and you get threatened a lot by the press representing a public who, they don't make any sense at all, and they'll disagree with you at the most opportune times. And say we start out with just this little tendency that as the politician you would get more, well, ingrained into an us versus them narrative. Every issue you have to know about, because you got to know about loads of issues and maybe they're not all personally linked to you. Again, you need to turn to the press to figure it out. And now all of the narratives of the press become the narratives. All of the categories of the press become the categories. You don't have another way to sort it out. Then, in particular, there's one category that's going to just bend over backwards to give you affirmation bias, to make it seem real and make it become real. That, okay, say everyone is now joined behind like the one guy who just everyone agrees to say yes to, which isn't, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also indistinguishable from fascism. When that's not really the case, the government isn't doing anything, and so I'm not a fan of democracy. Um, but I'm a fan of all the people who try. Now imagine if you're Donald Trump, and you can be really sure that Donald Trump, he's a man, he's got a kind of voter who, yeah, they're imaginary, but a kind of member of the public who he's got nothing to do with, who are his decent Joe. they're the like whatever suffering in the world is worth it to Donald Trump, because there's a section who are unspoken for sure. This big chunk of decent people, and I would imagine that every politician has these. You know, who do you represent that doesn't look like you? Oh, these people, and they've got to be imaginary, but that's okay if the model is good enough. But there's a worse side of it, that if you're Donald Trump and you've got this particular genre of people that you really like, anyone who wants to get into your good books is massively incentivized to become like a Trumpite nearby you, at least. And that's all it takes. And anyone who's not interested in affirming you, they're going to be really clear that they're not about you. And so your reality would become warped. Your reality would instate the dichotomy that you'd sort of suggested, but, you know, much more so that you had inherited of these categories and dichotomies. Your reality would change into Joes and anti-Joes. In this case, because you're the central one, people who have power, or no. I don't know. Yeah, and then I wrote more stuff about how I know I have Joes and anti-Joes, and I was saying, well, my Joe is the man. No, then there's the Satan Joe. Okay, so everyone's good. I'm gonna say has their Joes and anti-Joes. Um, I know who my Joes are. It's embarrassing to say. My anti-Joes are like the man on the street. They hassle me a lot. They don't threaten me in any way, but they like cast threats, and they make me have to deal with that. And you know, they do tax me as a group. The man on the street, well, all of them? No, just the ones I'm identifying who are a very small minority. Are they a minority of people who have caused harm onto me? No, I suppose not, because I would think of police as those same group, the man on the street, who are, to me, all anti-Joes. But I think everyone also has, like, for their sanity, you've got to see your enemies somewhere, but you can't look them in the face. So I think everyone also has their Satan Joes of who do I really think is evil? Who do I dehumanize? I see humans doing stuff that isn't all humane. What's my explanation for that? I'm saying in 100% of people, we say that there's a subset of people who we can't really name, who we say are inhumane. We don't think about it very much, that people can create decisions like no one around us creates decisions, that someone can say, yeah, let's fire that nuclear bomb, or let's have that concentration camp or something, and everything we know about humans doesn't stack up to these kinds of decisions. How can it possibly be? I think to explain like the everyday sorts of grief, we have our anti-Joes who are like, oh, they're the bugbears of society, and you think they're a schmuck, you don't want to sit near them. You ascribe agency to your anti-Joes. That a lot of what happens on the internet in the English-speaking world is people meet their anti-Joes and shout at them. They say, hey, this isn't how it is, you've got to see it this way. And there's this real compassion that you have moral agency if only you will understand and hear. But that's not how people treat Osama bin Laden. It's not how people treat Ahmad Arbery. It's not how people treat Satan Joes. I'm not saying there's anything evil about these people, but the the type of person that you don't ascribe them moral agency. I don't think maybe there's many people. If you spend time around any human, you find out they're human and humane. And so this illusion that we have of the evil character is dispelled whenever we're close to them, but segregation can make it really real, especially segregation with extra added exacerbated narrativization. And I was thinking, because these things are very subjective, um, my anti Joe for sure is the man on the street, and my Satan Joe is the man in power. Oh, I don't think that killing politicians is an ethical decision. I'm not going to do it, and I'm not going to advise anyone does it. But it's as moot to me as like eating a chicken burger is to someone who eats chicken burgers. Just isn't an ethical consideration because, geez, there's only like 600 MPs that need to die, and then who's going to stand up and say, yeah, keep on warring? And 600 isn't many deaths compared to what the British Armed Forces will procure this year for no good reason other than those people didn't think about it, didn't stop it. Now, sure, their reality is being fed to them by really weird sources, and now I empathize with them a lot more. I found my way to empathize with them by also seeing it straight for me first, that I owe them nothing of my consideration. The man in power for me is my Satan Joe, so if my knee is on their neck, I'm not that interested in lifting my knee when they say they can't breathe. It's human. Sometimes we go out and kill something to eat it. It's been the case since before we could talk, for a long time before we could talk. I think talking is better, but not if it's bullshit and not if there's anything that we really, really need to avoid. We can have a discussion about whether something needs to be avoided or not, but I haven't seen the case made. It is okay to promote rape, but not violence. I'd prefer to promote violence and get rid of the rape. I don't promote violence. Probably shouldn't be on YouTube spinning about whether or not I promote violence. But anyway, Satan Jazz, I was also seeing something of this binary opposition where I'll try and write it out maybe. That my anti Joe, the man on the street, and my Satan Joe, the man in power, I see complicity between these two. And the person who, their anti Joe is sissy liberals. They love to hate on sissy liberals, but then there's Satan Joe, the person they think is morally unaccountable and the cause of inhumane things. I have mentioned one example that is very much taught in America of that it's going to be a poor, black, violent man who's athletic, who's going to hurt you. The sissy liberals are complicit in that because they're like, give us more rights and let everyone go wild. And they just don't understand that there are these people who can't be talked to at all, who are going to do the really, really bad things. There's this complicity, and going deeper on this particular example, you can be like, oh, the sissy liberals, they listen to rap music. They want to be the poor, athletic, violent, ethnic stereotype. They wear the same clothes, and for me too, the man on the street is so complicit in what the man in power does. How can you be such a sissy and just sit by and not feel like you have responsibility about how your society is run? And if you do, then what is this? So that is the last bit that I see such a thing as Joes and anti-Joes of your stereotype of who's good, because we have to have some kind of heuristic about who's good and bad, who's safe, who's not. We need to feel safe around some people, and we are constantly taught that we need to feel unsafe around some people. If we weren't taught that and we were just allowed to infer by ourselves, we would walk around the streets and see how much crime, how much terrorism, how much poverty. Because it's to do with humanity and, well, humaneness, and that is ineffable. I don't think we have, like, well, we do have the God Joe, the other end. I think it's either God or yourself, because I'm a Joe to me for sure, but I'm not above or beneath any of the other Joes, and that's because God has made me. I don't choose who's Joes. I'm not. My Joes are the ones who believe. I make generalizations about them and get more hurt when they're upset. It's gonna be okay. Did we get around to anything on the algorithm thing? Well, yeah, I mean, one way that you can weaponize the YouTube algorithm, which is so effective, is to be the person that your fan base, they have a lot in common, so they're all like cross recommending each other for the similar kind of stuff. And then you proactively sit there and mock the other alternatives. And if you already, by watching just one kind of media, you're already at a risk of only being able to relate to one thing. I've done that as an experiment. It was okay. I'm glad. Now I just can't relate to most of the stuff that's on TV. But if you have one thing that's your genre that you relate to, it can be healthy or unhealthy. It depends on what else you've got going on in the world. But if the person there with all of these attention beams pointed at them starts saying, hey, if anyone comes up to you and tells you about like our nearest political adversary, don't listen to them, they're an idiot. That works. By the power of the algorithm, it's very powerful. There's Joes, anti-Joes, Satan Joes, and algorithms. Peace.